The Wizard of Oz. According to the Library of Congress, this timeless musical fantasy adventure is the most popular film ever made. Embodying some of humanity's most enduring values, this American classic's popularity hasn't faded at all in over 8 decades since its release in 1939. What is it about this story that causes it to resonate so strongly with such a large percentage of the population across generations and around the world? Answering this question will require we take a deeper look at its author, Lyman Frank Baum, and the occult themes that influenced and inspired his creation. We will primarily be focusing on the film in this presentation, but we will refer to the book at times as well. But first, let's establish exactly what kind of story The Wizard of Oz is. The Wizard of Oz, like many other great works of art, is an allegory. An allegory is a story, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a moral or political one. Its potent allegorical symbolism is precisely why this story resonates with so many people on a deeper or even subconscious level that we often aren't able to recognize consciously. Specifically, the story of The Wizard of Oz is an occult allegory. The word occult, stemming from the Latin occultare, meaning to hide or to conceal, means hidden, mysterious, beyond the range of ordinary knowledge or experience, communicated only to the initiated, or esoteric. Some of you may be thinking that the word occult has a more negative connotation or meaning, but it does not. It simply means hidden. There are many occult traditions, and you've very likely heard of at least a few. Some of the occult themes and traditions that Baum leaned on for inspiration are alchemy, astrology, Kabbalah, Freemasonry, Hermeticism, Rosicrucianism, Tarot, and Theosophy. Though each of these traditions could still remain somewhat obscure even after a lifetime of study, we will only touch on the surface of several of these occult traditions in this presentation. Now is an excellent time to clearly note that all occult traditions are merely tools for spiritual guidance or guiding the soul's journey, and like any tool, they can be used for both moral or immoral ends. So who was L. Frank Baum? He was an American author of children's books, best known for writing The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, plus 68 other novels, 82 short stories, and over 200 poems. He was born in 1856 in Chittenango, New York, but moved to Aberdeen, South Dakota in 1888. He later published The Wonderful Wizard of Oz in 1900 and subsequently passed away at age 62 in 1919. Baum was an occultist, or someone who studies hidden mysteries, and he confirmed such in 1890 while holding the job of editor for the Aberdeen Saturday Pioneer by penning a series of articles introducing his readers to Theosophy. In one of these articles he wrote, quote, "Amongst various sects so numerous in America today who find their fundamental basis in occultism, the Theosophist stands preeminent both in intelligence and point of numbers. Theosophy is not a religion. Its followers are simply, quote, searchers after truth. Theosophists, in fact, are dissatisfied with the world, dissenters from all creeds. They admit the existence of a God, but not necessarily of a personal God. To them, God is nature, and nature is God. The main tenets of Theosophy, as taught by Helena Blavatsky, are the same tenets found in many other occult schools of thought. Chief among these is the belief of the presence of a, quote, divine spark within every person, which, with the proper discipline and training, can lead to spiritual illumination or enlightenment. The motto of Theosophy, as seen in its logo, is, 'There is no religion higher than truth.'" American Theosophist magazine issue number 74 further confirms Baum's interest in Theosophy and the tradition's influence of his story, The Wizard of Oz, with this quote, "The Wonderful Wizard of Oz can be regarded as a theosophical allegory, pervaded by theosophical ideas from beginning to end. The story came to Baum as an inspiration, and he accepted it with a certain awe, as a gift from the outside, or perhaps from deep within himself. Baum's own remarks regarding how he came up with this timeless story, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, are extremely telling as well. Quote, "It was pure inspiration. It came to me right out of the blue. I think that sometimes the great author has a message to get across, and he has to use the instrument at hand. I happen to be that medium, and I believe the magic key was given to me to open the doors to sympathy, understanding, joy, peace and happiness. He later added, "The appetite of our age for occultism demands to be satisfied, and while with the mediocrity of most people it will result in mere sensationalism, it will lead in many to higher, nobler, and bolder thought. Who can tell what mysteries these braver and abler intellects may unravel in future ages?" The film's opening dedication page hints that there is a moral to this story. Quote, "For nearly 40 years, this story has given faithful service to the young in heart, and time has been powerless to put its kindly philosophy out of fashion. To those of you who have been faithful to it in return, and to the young in heart, we dedicate this picture." The dedication is clearly saying that this story is ultimately about heart. More specifically, this story is about how the heart is the conduit for this divine spark. The young in heart refers to those youngsters who have not yet been jaded by our cultural norms and limitations, and so their divine spark hasn't yet been snuffed out, as well as those adults who have somehow remained immune to all the cultural conditioning, and therefore have retained some degree of divine spark. We will elaborate on this idea shortly. It should also be noted that The Wizard of Oz follows the hero's journey as made popular by Joseph Campbell's The Hero with a Thousand Faces. Campbell's book, originally published in 1949, is a comprehensive and thorough cross-cultural anthology outlining the nature of the soul's journey on this plane, as symbolically laid out across all recorded time, places, and cultures in various creative formats such as mythology, scripture, oral histories, storytelling, and even modern Hollywood productions. Also known as the monomyth, the essential recipe for the hero's journey is as follows. The hero is going about their life in their ordinary world. They are then called to adventure. Sometimes this call is denied at first. Then the hero embarks on the adventure, where he or she often meets a mentor and new friends and allies. They then cross a threshold into a hidden world, are gifted a special, often magical tool, go through a series of tests and trials, encounter a major ordeal, often known as the Dark Night of the Soul, slay the beast, which in Jungian psychology, the beast typically represents the shadow self, obtain the rewards or elixir of life, which often is in the form of hidden or special knowledge. Then they finally cross back over the threshold, back into the ordinary world, where they share their reward or knowledge with their community, and from there the cycle eventually repeats. As we know, Dorothy is antagonized by Elmira Gulch, who is after her dog Toto, i.e. her spirit, her intuition. Shortly after a confrontation between Toto and Elmira Gulch, where Toto bites Gulch, this action representing the instinct to fight back against oppression, Dorothy desperately seeks advice from her Auntie Em and Uncle Henry, but they're too busy keeping the farm and dismiss the oppression she and her dog are facing. She then goes to the farmhands for advice, first to Hickory, but he doesn't care either, because he doesn't have the time for it, and also turns a blind eye to the oppression she's facing. Then she goes to Hunk, and Hunk says she's going about this all wrong and not using her head, and that if she should just avoid going by Elmira's house altogether. He's advocating avoidance and applying more smarts to the situation. Then lastly, Dorothy goes to Zeke, but Zeke suggests courageously taking on Elmira head on and says, "Walk right up to her and spit in her eye, that's what I would do." This all, of course, foreshadowing lessons to be learned by our heroes over the rainbow later on in the story. It is at this point where Dorothy sings the song Over the Rainbow. This is an explicit reference to the Rainbow Bridge, sometimes called a stairway to heaven, a stargate, or a wormhole, which represents a bridge between worlds of thinking, or a bridge to a new level of consciousness, or one might even call it a paradigm shift. Gulch then shows up at the family farm, insisting that Dorothy turn her dog Toto over to her to be exterminated, and that she has a court order to do so. Gulch is clearly a rich, arrogant woman in this community and thinks she can do whatever she wants. She wants the dog because of what Toto represents. He represents human intuition and creativity, the most important faculties at the disposal of the human soul. And she wants to destroy this. Dorothy, of course, protests, but her aunt and uncle eventually convince her she has no other choice and must turn the dog over to Gulch. Gulch then takes Toto away in her basket. Of course, Toto quickly escapes, symbolizing how difficult it is to truly arrest or suppress the human spirit. This, we will see, is a recurring theme that happens several times in the film. When Toto returns to Dorothy, she quickly realizes that her oppressors will be back for her beloved Toto, so she runs away from home. The first person she comes upon on her adventure is a charlatan, a fake fortune teller going by the title Professor Marvel. As we see on his carriage, he's making the claim that he's illuminated, but he turns out to be a charlatan that needs to steal a family photo from Dorothy in order to provide his reading to her. Eventually, Professor Marvel convinces Dorothy she needs to return home because her Auntie Em is sick. Upon Dorothy's return, the farm is swept up in a tornado, which itself is another symbol for a bridge or a portal to another world. Again, between lower states of consciousness and higher states of consciousness. She seeks shelter in the house and is swept up away in the tornado. It is this tornado that ultimately brings her across the threshold to the land of Oz. The house eventually lands in the land of Oz, where the film then becomes colorized, expressly representing the crossing of a threshold into a new and hidden world. The first character Dorothy meets in this new world is the goddess figure, or the sacred feminine figure, or from the hero's journey model, her mentor, Glinda, the Good Witch of the North, where she informs Dorothy that she has just killed the Wicked Witch of the East. The Wicked Witch of the West shows up and is immediately concerned with obtaining the ruby slippers, but Glinda makes them appear on Dorothy's feet, and our mentor has gifted the magical tools to our hero as predicted by the monomyth. Dorothy has to take the yellow brick road to find the wonderful Wizard of Oz in hopes that he is powerful enough to help her get back home to Kansas. The yellow brick road represents the path to illumination, and that is exactly why it is gold. It's symbolic of the alchemical process of transmuting ignorance into enlightenment, or base metals into pure gold. The path is spiral because it represents the journey from lower levels of consciousness to higher levels of consciousness. The spiral representing both the uncertainty of what's around the next corner of this path and the idea that true enlightenment comes from revisiting teachings and gaining a different level of understanding from the same information each time it's reviewed. Or as spiritualist Barry Gillespie puts it, the path isn't a straight line, it's a spiral. You continually come back to things you thought you understood and see deeper truths. Dorothy, as we said, represents the human soul. In obvious similarity to the hero's journey, in the tarot tradition, the soul embarks on the fool's journey. If we compare Dorothy with the fool from the tarot tradition, the symbolism could not be any clearer. The major arcana tarot card, the Fool, and in the modern deck, the Joker. Here we see Dorothy and the Fool side by side. They both have their belongings, their bouquet of flowers, their dog or animal companion, both beginning their journey with a leap of faith led only by their intuitive capacities. In the minor arcana deck, Dorothy represents the suit of Pentacles, which is representative of Earth, or the material plane, and also the physical faculties required for the soul's journey. Along the path of the yellow brick road, Dorothy first meets the Scarecrow, whose only wish is to have a brain. The Scarecrow represents our need to overcome our ignorance. If we're going to continue to evolve as a species on this planet, we cannot remain in a lower state of consciousness most of us would recognize or label willful ignorance. In the tarot tradition, the Scarecrow can be represented by the major arcana card, the Hermit, And in the minor arcana, the suit swords, which represents air, or the mental plane, the ethereal plane. Swords also represent mental discernment, or the ability to separate truth from lies. The Scarecrow is in spiritual darkness. He knows he is in darkness, and he has the desire for knowledge. This is precisely why the Scarecrow wants a brain. The two continue on, and they encounter the Tin Man. He is rusted and wants a heart. This represents apathy, or not caring. He needs to be lubricated in order to feel again. The Tin Man is represented by the major arcana tarot card, the Lovers, and by the minor arcana tarot suit, Cups, which represents the emotional or ethereal plane and how we carry our water or our emotions on this plane. Then the three finally encounter the Cowardly Lion. He can only feign courage. He wants true courage more than anything else. He is the major arcana tarot card, Strength, and the minor arcana tarot suit, Wands, which represents fire or will, the plane of will or actions. These characters actually correspond with the Freemason first-degree tracing board known as the Temple of Solomon. The checkerboard floor represents the physical plane or the material realm on which the spiritual work is done, i.e. Dorothy or Earth. The middle pillar is the pillar of wisdom, leading to the all-seeing eye or third eye, human pineal gland. This represented by Scarecrow and Will. The pillar of Boaz, beautiful emotional pillar, is represented by Tin Man and his care. Finally, the lion represents the pillar of Yasin, the pillar of strength, which represents the actions we take on the physical plane. Proper moral action or guts, or as the lion says, the noive. In the astrological tradition, the ruling houses of each season are the signs that fall mid-season. So Taurus is equivalent to Earth and Dorothy. Leo is equivalent to fire and lion. Scorpio is equivalent to water, and the Tin Man, and Aquarius is equivalent to air, and the Scarecrow, sometimes called the Angels of the Corners, representing the 4 seasons of the year, or the 4 archangels, or the 4 gospel writers. The Angels of the Corners are also shown in the World card of the tarot deck as well. In order to get into what the Wicked Witch of the West represents, we have to shift gears momentarily and dive into the controversial topic of mind control, because, as we will see clearly, that is exactly what she represents. She represents the hidden or occult forces that are directing humanity towards a dark state of consciousness and therefore a dark material realm. To understand mind control, we have to understand how human consciousness operates. As we can see from this diagram, the left brain functions and the right brain functions are quite different. The left brain functions include analytic thought, logic, language, and science, and can be represented by the blade, or the yang, or the masculine principles. The right brain functions, in contrast, include holistic thought, intuition, creativity, art, and music, and are represented by the chalice, or the yin or feminine principles. Achieving balance between the hemispheres activates the pineal gland and the prefrontal neocortex, the part of the brain that separates us from the rest of the animal kingdom, as a matter of fact. If chronically imbalanced due to some form of trauma, the left brain becomes the controller, dominator, slave master aspect of the brain. Similarly, the right brain can become the submissive slave aspect of the brain. As we can see in this dorsal scan of a brain, the left side is a scan of a brain that is normal and healthy functioning, or in global EEG coherence, meaning that both hemispheres of the brain are firing on all cylinders. The scan on the right is of a brain that has left hemisphere damage. This is the scan of a prototypical violent brain, a dominator or control freak, according to the physician who conducted it. Notice that most of the damage is centered in the prefrontal neocortex, the seat of higher consciousness. There's no other way to put it, as is clearly depicted in these brain scans, this is an emotionally or psychologically brain damaged person. All forms of mind control involve trauma. There are many forms of mind control, but by far the two most prolific forms of mind control work as follows. The first one works through the right hemisphere and binds the left hemisphere. The second one works through the left hemisphere and binds the right hemisphere. These two methods are more commonly known as religion and government, respectively. The primary objective of any form of mind control is to keep the target perpetually imbalanced on a mental level and therefore on a soul or spiritual level. True mind control involves a form of psychic imbalance. The first form of mind control, religion, from the Latin religare, meaning to tie back, to hold back, to bind fast. This is not always negative. Religion could sometimes mean to bind back to the laws of nature, for example. But what modern religions have largely become is a predominant form of holding us back from the truth that is exercised through the right hemisphere using unchallenged dogmatic beliefs, which then binds the left hemisphere's functions, such as analytical thought, logic, science, and mathematics. This is exactly what the Wicked Witch of the East represents, the old world order of total control through religion. And indeed, the ruling class of the old world were the priest class. But according to Baum, the death of the Wicked Witch of the East is a sign that this form of mind control isn't the main form of control we need to look out for anymore. Instead, it is the Wicked Witch of the West, or the New World Order, that Baum is providing us with a clear warning of. It is the New World Order of total government that is the form of mind control we should fear. Government, from the Latin gubernare, meaning to control, and menti, meaning mind. Etymologically speaking, government literally translates to control of the mind or mind control. It is no accident that the antagonist, Elmira Gulch, a left hemisphere brain damaged control freak, uses government to satisfy her arrogance and egoic desires to dominate others. Now that we've explored imbalances of the brain, let's talk a little bit about a balanced brain. A balanced brain, equitably incorporating both the masculine left hemispheric brain functions with the feminine right hemispheric brain functions, is required for activation of the pineal gland and proper function of the neocortex and the corresponding higher states of consciousness that comes with this. Here we see the symbolism of this balance as seen in the Seal of Solomon. The Seal of Solomon is in green and is a combination of the blade or soul or sun over the chalice or moon, Salo moon. Sol meaning sun and Mon meaning moon. Solomon, Temple of Solomon, Seal of Solomon. The balance of the visible light spectrum frequencies, the balance of chakras, the midpoint of the chakra system is the heart chakra. It is the fourth or middle chakra of the 7 chakras. Green equals balance, both symbolically and in the physical world. Think of how much green there is in nature. Green represents health, nature, nurture, and love. This is why the objective of the journey is reaching the Emerald City, which represents balance. The Wicked Witch being green is meant to be a blatant perversion of this idea, just as money in the US being green is also a perversion of nature. By making these perversions green, it is an attempt to position these things as love, balance, and nature, and it is none of these things. Money, in fact, is a form of mind control. In fact, it's the biggest form of mind control. Money makes all these other forms of mind control possible. Think of it. Money is an integral part of religions, and it's the biggest part of government. The opulence of the churches and the waste of the governments of the world, what could they do with that money instead of perpetuate the dogma and false belief systems that they do? It's all about money and keeping you imbalanced with their talismans. That's what money actually is. Money is the fuel that feeds the two most potent forms of mind control currently plaguing mankind. In what can only be described as an example of synchromysticism, this topic can be understood further by reviewing Bill Still's The Secret of Oz documentary, which exposes the allegorical meanings embedded in The Wizard of Oz regarding our monetary system. Now, as we get back to the story of Dorothy and her companions, they were on their way to see The Wizard of Oz. Two characters then fall asleep in the field of poppies. This represents not having the will to go forward once you start to awaken your spirit. Remember, the cowardly lion represents courage or will, or not using your resources effectively. Again, Dorothy represents the soul and the resources at the soul's disposal. Most of us waste our resources, our time and our money, on trivial or material things, if we're being honest. The poppy field also very likely represents going back to sleep via escapism, such as self-medicating or drug abuse, as well as the attack on the human spirit by the pharmaceutical industry, the dulling of the human spirit, emotions, instinct, intuition, creativity, and the overall human experience by the constant attack of drugs since the emergence of the pharmaceutical industry. Pharmacy, from the Greek pharmakia, meaning a preparer of drugs, a poisoner, a sorcerer, stemming from the Greek pharmakon, meaning a drug, a poison, a charm, spell, or enchantment. The pharmaceutical industry as we currently know it emerged in the mid-1800s and began gaining undeserved political power right about the time Baum was authoring this story. To suggest this merely is coincidence is to exhibit willful ignorance. The only two affected by the poppy fields are Dorothy, who again represents material resources, and the cowardly lion, who again represents courage. This symbolizes clearly that you can know the Scarecrow and care the Tin Man, but if you don't use your resources, Dorothy, and your courage, the cowardly lion, it won't be enough to complete the journey. Glinda then comes to the rescue and makes it snow, which may be another drug reference to cocaine, using her sacred feminine powers, which is that of the creative force. This act representing what we really have to get in touch with in order to determine how to properly use our resources on the material plane in order to achieve illumination, and need to return the balance back towards feminine principles. The heroes finally reach the Emerald City and are greeted once again by our charlatan, acting this time as the gatekeeper. Then the ferryman or carriageman, yet again as a second gatekeeper, and eventually the great and powerful Oz himself. The same character playing all these different roles symbolizes how most people we encounter are under some form of mind control, and given the right triggers can morph into self-appointed guardians of the status quo, a concept that is brilliantly portrayed by the Agent Smiths in the Matrix movies. After cleaning up and making themselves presentable to the Wizard of Oz, there is a very important scene representing the coronation of the king, where the cowardly lion is coronated by his companions, and this represents the vital role of courage on the hero's journey or the path of enlightenment. The courage to begin, the courage to continue, the courage to act, the courage to enter the cave, the courage to cross the threshold, the courage to face the dragon, the courage to face one's own shadow self, and the courage to return home again. What Baum is symbolizing with this scene is that ultimately there is no higher force in the cosmos than courage. We must not only have the courage to begin this journey, but we must also find the courage to finish it. The heroes finally face the Wizard of Oz, and he does not at all seem wonderful, great, or all-powerful. This is because he is a false savior, which is why he must ask the four lowly heroes to take on the controlling force plaguing the land of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West, and her endless fleet of flying monkeys. This scene symbolizing the folly of savior worship. Whether they be religious saviors, political saviors, or spiritual saviors, in the end, it is us and only us that must find the courage to take the action necessary to manifest the change we want to see in the world. So Dorothy and her companions set out for the Wicked Witch and travel through the haunted forest, where we then see owls with glowing red eyes, symbolizing people in the darkness being preyed upon by those few who can see in the dark. Those dark occult sorcerers directing humanity towards darkness and chaos, using their advanced perception of both the individual and collective psyche. The witch sends her hordes of flying monkeys to capture Dorothy. The flying monkeys, of course, representing the brainwashed, mindless order-following class, such as bureaucrats, law enforcers, and soldiers. The ignorant minions who unquestionably serve these institutions of control and domination, never realizing that they are merely tools for maintaining the status quo. The flying monkeys capture Dorothy and Toto and bring them to the witch's castle, where the Wicked Witch can finally obtain the ruby slippers. The ruby slippers, as we'll see, symbolize the philosopher's stone, sometimes called the alchemist's stone. In the book, the slippers were originally silver, and were only changed to ruby in the movie because of the desire to highlight the new Technicolor film technology. In the philosophy of alchemy, it is asserted that all base metals, or base modes of consciousness, are imperfections of gold, or pure consciousness, and that all metals are ordained by nature to become the perfect gold of the sun. The alchemist, therefore, seeks to remove from all base materials their disorderly imperfections or base characteristics, to bring them to their true state of natural order, and to transmute them into alchemical gold, representing the purification of the body, mind, and spirit. Or to put it differently, the journey from the base of the tree of life to the crown of the tree of life, or the journey down the yellow brick road to the Emerald City. The Wicked Witch wants to destroy the ruby slippers because they represent the philosopher's stone. They represent alchemy, the ability to transmute base states of consciousness into higher consciousness, which is what will eventually guide humanity out of the mess we are currently in. The Wicked Witch's desire to destroy the ruby slippers represents the dominator culture's desire to destroy the sacred feminine and its principles of inner wisdom, intuition, and creation, all of which would lead to the end of the status quo, as the elimination of imbalanced brains would lead to the complete loss of effect of all forms of mind control, and therefore the complete dissolution of those conducting it. Unity consciousness is the elixir, the end goal of both the hero's and the fool's journey. Realizing we're all one, we're all birthed from the same creator, we're all aspects of the same whole. We simply cannot think that we're going to keep all of these dominator institutions we have and still be free. The institutions we have are based in fear and in control and need to be dissolved. We're not going to be free and keep the monetary system, the political system, the legal system, the military system, the financial system, etc. Back to our story. Toto escapes the clutches of the witch yet again, and this represents the intuition escaping again, not buying into the mind control and following the intuition. He finds Dorothy's friends and guides them back to the castle where Dorothy is imprisoned. They rescue her, but get cornered by the witch and her guards, where the Wicked Witch then lights her broomstick, symbolizing the torch of illumination, a symbol of the Illuminati sorcerer-controlled dominator cult. The illuminated torch is a mockery put in our faces, suggesting that these sorcerers have the light, the knowledge, and not us. She sets the scarecrow on fire, representing the aspects of mind control taking effect. Dorothy then takes a bucket of water, representing the elixir of life, or Dorothy achieving enlightenment, and uses that to defeat the Wicked Witch, melting or dissolving her and her power out of existence. The heroes then bring the broomstick back to the wizard, who still refused to help Dorothy with her ascension, further symbolizing his fraudulent nature. Toto, or human intuition, then pulls back the curtain, revealing that what's really under there is just a weak old man who wants control. This is clearly symbolizing that all these control structures All these institutions of control, such as religion and government, are not supernatural, are not all-powerful manifestations, but just ideas implemented and ran by men, most of which who have a fraudulent nature, but love playing the role of external saviors for those who believe in such things because it grants them so much power and control. The illusion of the all-powerful Wizard of Oz is ultimately so weak that even a little dog can see right through it. The Wizard of Oz then tells the heroes that because he came to Oz in an aerial vehicle when he landed, everyone just treated him like a god or a powerful wizard, so he decided to stay. He then tells them he can still help bring Dorothy home to Kansas because he still has his hot air balloon, but eventually has to admit he doesn't even really know how to control the thing. Luckily, Toto, again, human intuition, comes to the rescue by jumping out of the basket, likely saving Dorothy from yet more trouble. At this point, Glinda, the sacred feminine essence, helps Dorothy and tells her that she, quote, had the power all along, my dear. She has always been and will always be her own savior. This journey was only to get her to understand that she had everything she needed within her already. The answer was the Philosopher's Stone. Ultimately, the lesson is that we need to stop looking at this force of creation as something external and start realizing it is all around us and within us. And the only limit to what we can create are the limits we put on ourselves. The ruby slippers representing the internal qualities of the soul that one has to nurture and refine so they can save themselves. She clicks these ruby slippers 3 times and returns back home. Now an awakened being operating in the physical world with her intuition held closely to her chest. She's trying to explain to the unawakened people what she experienced, but likely to no avail. In the end, true wisdom, true care, and most of all, true courage is all that we will ever have and all that we will ever need. And if we nurture and refine these inner qualities in ourselves and in each other, just maybe humanity will reach the Emerald City.
Trees of green and red roses too. I watch them bloom for me and you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Well, I see skies of blue and I see clouds of white and the brightness of day. I like the dark and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people passing by. I see friends shaking hands, singing, how do you do? They really say, I love you. I hear babies cry and I watch them go. They'll learn much more than we'll know, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Someday I wish upon a star, wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where trouble melts like a lemon drops high above the chimney top. That's where you find me, oh, somewhere over the rainbow, way